Today is a very special birthday in the world of music, and one that you might not even know. Now, most of you out there know who the band Earth, Wind & Fire were, especially in the 70s. They had an enormous amount of hits, and they really bought funk music, jazz funk music, with very elaborate instrumental solos and great ability through Maurice White, Philip Bailey, Andrew Woolfolk, the saxophone player for the band, and Maurice's brother Verdine on bass, to the public eye, and made it hugely popular and got all kinds of top 10 and top 20 hits throughout the 70s, and were one of the most popular bands of the era. Now, one of the major architects of their hit sound was a 19-year-old keyboardist. Well, he was 19 in 1972 when he joined the band, when they moved from Warner Brothers to Columbia. And what happened was he had learned all of the songs from their first two albums without him on Warner Brothers. And his name was Larry Dunhill, and he is known as Larry Dunn. And he played keyboards and later synthesizers and programmed them for the band. Now, you might be wondering, who is this Larry Dunn guy? You know, I've never heard of him. I know who Philip Bailey is and Maurice White is. Well, for those of you who aren't really heavy funketeers, as it were, and don't know every single band member of Earth, Wind & Fire, Larry Dunn, if you were to look at a picture of the band from the 70s, he was actually the most distinctive one. He had very big penetrating eyes, the hugest afro in the group, and was the most distinctive looking. You would have thought he was the lead singer, the way he looked. Very strong looking individual. And he wasn't the lead singer or even sang at all on the records, but he had such a strong presence in creating their sound that people don't even understand. Because if you're writing or composing, you usually have to either play a keyboard instrument like a piano or an electric piano, or a guitar or bass. And he played keyboard, so he was instrumental to their sound. No pun definitely intended there. And I have every Earth, Wind & Fire album ever recorded. Major admirer here. I don't use the word fan because I'm not a fanatic. I wouldn't lose my mind if I met Larry Dunn, who's turning 60 today. Happy birthday, by the way. 60th birthday today. Or any of the other members of the band. I'm an admirer, a very big admirer of their music. Anyway, that all being said, this is their first album. This was something that was in my father's record collection on vinyl. And it's an experimental band, really. They had Ronnie Laws, who, interestingly enough, Larry Dunn would go on to produce later in his solo career. He wrote a song that a lot of jazz funk artists, Ronnie Laws that is, still play to this day, called Always There. Well, anyway, they also had Roland Bautista, who would actually become their guitarist in the 80s. But that's another story. And Jessica Cleaves, a female singer. Yes, Earth, Wind & Fire had a female singer on their first two Columbia albums. And I don't know why they needed it with the higher voice of Philip Bailey, but they had Jessica Cleaves on this, and she later on became a member of Parliament Funkadelic. I think she was one of the bridesmaids, Brides of Funkenstein or whatever. But this album actually had a song on it called Power, which was a very intense instrumental with a very significant saxophone solo, and Larry Dunn plays more organ on this particular album. They didn't really have a lot of hits from this, but some great songs like Time Is On Your Side, and Mom was pretty good. It's a nice kind of Latin-tinged Mother's Day tribute. Mom, she gave me words of love. And Remember the Children, you know, is another good song that's very funky on this album. And they did some covers of Where Have All the Flowers Gone. They were putting their sound together, but this was their introduction to Columbia in 1972. This is their second album. Individually like this, it's pretty hard to get now. But you can get it on different CD sets and find it used sometimes pretty easy. This is Head to the Sky. And they had a song on this called Keep Your Head to the Sky, which was one of their first big kind of top 10 hits. You know, and it's not really in their traditional style. Their sound is still a little bit skeletal and psychedelic on this, but they have some great songs. Evil, my goodness, it sounds like something out of the Santana vein. Very Latin, And there's a song on here called Build Your Nest, which is a very intense funk number, and another one I love called Clover, which is again very Latin jazzy. It's very much a musician's sort of album at this point, but this is where they introduce most of the classic lineup of the band that we all know. There's Larry Dunn right there, the one with the big afro, and they introduced Johnny Graham on this album, and Al McKay, who was their guitarist for their hit period in much of the 70s. Here's the back of that album. And that's Head to the Sky. Now this album, they were still searching for a little bit of their sound, but they'd got a lot more going together when they did this one. For one thing, the logo that they used for much of the 70s is there. Now this is a remastered edition that came out in the early 2000s. I don't have all the remasters because I don't know. They have great bonus tracks, and I don't know why I don't have them, but this one I just had to get because I love this album. It's called Open Our Eyes. Now Charles Stepney, who produced Ramsey Lewis when Maurice White was in it, and produced their even bigger hit albums later, became a producer on this album, and they recorded this in an area of Colorado called Caribou, and you can see the mountains in the back, and it really created a unique vibration on this album. Mighty Mighty was a pretty big hit for them. Devotion is one of their standards, and that is where their traditional sound begins to come to play. But I love songs like Fair But So Uncool, and Kalimba's Story, Feelin' Blue. You just gotta listen to this album. This is amazing music. Very, very superbly and wonderfully arranged and orchestrated and composed, yet very jazzy and very grooving, and some beautiful vocal harmonies from everybody involved on that level of this album. Now it's a remaster, as you can see. You open up this, it's got a great color picture of them. I love that picture. It's pretty common. There's Larry Dunn right there. You can see what I mean by distinctive. His look is pretty distinctive, I think, for the group. And let's Open Our Eyes. Wonderful album. It doesn't have the big hits everybody knows, but get it. Get it. It's a great album. You have to hear it. I hate to keep selling on you on that, but this is an album you need to hear. If you haven't heard it already, you need to hear that. Now this one, this is where things really changed for them. They scored a movie, which I have, by Sig Shore, who did Superfly, called That's the Way of the World. It bombed, I think, because it starred Harvey Keitel as a man who was caught between managing the group, as they were called in the movie, played by Earth, Wind and Fire, and a Osmond/Carpenter's singing family who were actually not quite as pure and lily white as they seemed to be. And in the end, there was a series of events that led to the idea of That's the Way of the World. But the soundtrack did very differently than the somewhat over-politicized film, which I actually love and I own on DVD, as their logo on the back. And Shining Star was the big hit off of this. Amazing that something that came from James Brown, straight from James Brown funk, with all these layers of keyboards on it. Larry Dunn is amazing on Fender Rhodes on that song. Actually became such a huge and enduring hit. It became such an enduring hit. And That's the Way of the World and Reasons. And these are songs everybody kind of knows by heart. These are the songs that made Earth, Wind and Fire commercially. But they did a song called Africano on this too, which is very much their jazz funk roots. Sounds a lot like Power from the Last Days in Time album. And they did a song called Yearnin' and Learnin', which is really great on here too. This album has everything. Pop, funk, jazz, R&B, soul, you name it, it's got it. I don't need to go anymore. That's their first big hit kind of record. Now I just got the remaster to this. Number one, because I lost the cover art from my original CD, and this has some great bonus cuts. And this album I just love. This is Gratitude. They've been touring, and I guess they didn't have a lot of time to record a new album right away, so they made this live document of their hits. Sorry for the camera shake. It's on a tripod here. And I could go on and on for 8-9 minutes talking about how wonderful this album is. The live version of Reasons is. I'll just listen to it somewhere, stream it, buy it, whatever. Just listen to that. It's absolutely amazing. And there's some studio cuts on here called Sunshine. The opening guitar riff to that, or bass riff, maybe a high bass riff actually, knowing the way funk is. That has been sampled by a lot of people, actually. And Sing a Song, another one of their classic hits. Celebrate is a really nice Afro-Latin percussive tune. My favorite here is Can't Hide Love, because the melodic and vocal harmony dynamics are so strong and so unique and so intense. So Earth, Wind & Fire. And if you open it up, it has the Ankh symbol, which Earth, Wind & Fire were famous for using with their interest in Egyptology, and a replication of the original gatefold in their live show. You can see Verdine spinning around on his drums here. Verdine White. There's Larry Dunn on the bottom. There's liner notes and pictures. I need to get all the remasters eventually. Now, sadly, in 1976, when they were recording this album, their producer, Charles Stepney, passed away. So they called this album Spirit in dedication to him. I love that very Tai Chi, Egyptology style cover. One of my favorite funk covers of all time. This isn't a particularly long album, but it has a song called Get Away, another one of their smashes, and I love On Your Face and Saturday Night is classic Earth, Wind & Fire funk. But Imagination, and they actually have a song on here called Earth, Wind & Fire, have huge swelling dynamics on them. And Spirit, of course, is a very deeply meditative song about their loss of Charles Stepney. And Bio, right there, is actually a song you could almost mistaken for disco, but it's actually just very fast funk, and it's not much in the way of pictures in there. I don't have the remaster yet, but that's the version I have. It's an excellent album. This is actually one of my favorite Earth, Wind & Fire albums. They changed their logo a bit. 1977, All in All. The big hit off of this was Fantasy, but they had some wonderful songs on here, such as Brazilian Rhyme, Interlude, and Jupiter. And Serpentine Fire is a wonderful way, I think, of melding mysticism and sexual metaphor. It's an absolutely wonderful lyrics. And Runnin' is another one of those jazzy style instrumentals, and Larry Dunn absolutely works out on that album, on keyboard and synthesizer, and again, they're showing themselves to be in sync with the musicians. And I love this inner gatefold. This is an expression of Maurice White's devotion to a religious affiliation that I believe is called pantheism, which would mean that all faiths represent one basic God. I suppose very controversial, but I can sort of understand that, looking at religion from a mythological context. And this album, and Earth, Wind & Fire in general, often express a pantheistic spirit. I know that a lot of people call it, it's kind of Anglo-Christian, but I think it's really more pantheistic, because it brings in Egyptology and different spiritual elements into it to create a very pantheistic, lyrically oriented idea, some Unitarianism too. Now this album, they recorded a greatest hits album in 1978 with a new song on it called September, and another one I really love that's lesser known called Love Music, but they released this in 1979, and it's produced by David Foster, and it's called I Am. Now, some people who like Earth, Wind & Fire's funk period don't like this album because it's very, very lushly produced, but I happen to personally love it. The hits off this album, of course, are After the Love Is Gone and Boogie Wonderland, which was their disco song, as it were. But there's some wonderful songs on here, such as Let Your Feelings Show and Can't Let Go, and Star is actually kind of a rock number, where Larry Dunn plays a very rock guitarish synthesizer, very much like Jan Hammer would have during that period. And You and I, of course, sounds like it could have been recorded during their classic days. And this is the end of the 70s for Earth, Wind & Fire. And there's a great opening photo inside it of the band. I love that. In their full costume of the time as well.